Welcome to movies. Dakota boys talk movies.
Cue James Bond theme.
Today we are talking about James Bond movies and also do a little bit of talk about Spectre, or as you Americans say, Spectra. And we'll do a little talking about that also. And so what we're going to do in this episode is talk about some of our favorite James Bonds and maybe a few of our underrated James Bonds. And then, like I said, we'll do a little talk about the newest installment, Spectre, with Daniel Craig once again playing James Bond for the fourth time.
And possibly last.
Possibly last. He's came out and said as much. And, so we'll be doing that also. So, Dakota, what was your first meeting of the man known as Bond?
Well, that was easy. I was taken to see the movie GoldenEye by my stepfather.
Okay.
The steppapa.
So you saw GoldenEye in theaters?
Yes, I was just a wee lad, and I had
in your hometown theater?
No, in Rapid City.
In Rapid City. What did we decide that we were trying to remember what the motto of that city was earlier today.
Yeah.
The city of faces. I don't know. City on the hills. Okay, so you saw GoldenEye in theaters, and what happened to you after that experience?
Well, I thought it was pretty cool. I was still...
Did it make you curious for other Bonds?
Well, I was kind of blown away when I was told that there were other movies, and I was like, I thought this was the first one. Or I thought this was like the only one.
Yeah.
And then that's when I found out about Sean Connery and Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton, and didn't find out about George Lazenby till years later. Like, what? There was one guy who made
he was Bond
movie?
in one film. He was Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Which he did such an awesome job, he just didn't need to do anymore.
That's why.
I
think there's a little more studio politics involved than just that.
I think that's his version of events. So
yeah,
why don't we just go with it?
I've heard him talk before. That dude has a pretty big ego. But.
He was at the bat once. He batted 1,000.
He batted 1,000.
He decided to retire.
He batted 1,000 over the long haul because it seemed like that movie is kind of like overlooked for a long time.
Yeah, he was unfortunately dubbed the black sheep of the Bonds, and if you liked him, you were...
Even though he's possibly the whitest.
If you were in a group of friends and everyone was naming their favorite Bonds, and you said George Lazenby, everyone would immediately stop what they were doing, look at you, and just want to slap you right across the face.
Whoa. You're allowed to say Timothy Dalton, but who the heck are you talking about? Oh, man. Well, yeah, for me... I was trying to remember, and I have absolutely no idea. All I know it was a Roger Moore one, and I remember as a kid thinking, everybody likes this guy? Because I just remember it just seemed so stupid. Even at the time, which makes me think it must have been like Moonraker or something. Because I remember thinking like it was almost like a live-action cartoon, which...
Was it the one where his car turns into a submarine?
It could have been. I just remember there was ridiculous things in it, and it seemed like Jaws was in it, so it was probably Moonraker. When he just grabs that cable and is like, like bites it, like what is going on? So yeah, so I had you have a pretty good memory of your introduction. Of course, it was make it sound old here, but a more recent Bond, even though it was 1995.
Yeah,
that's recent by Dakota and my standards, 20 years. So yeah, you were a wee 10-year-old lad. A wee little lad from Ireland watching the British... No, I don't. You've probably never been accused of being Irish, huh?
No, not any point in time in my life.
Me neither, and I technically am Scotch-Irish, but...
Maybe it's because you don't enjoy the booze.
It could be. It could be that I'm more or less a teetotaler, but not quite to that extreme. Yeah, so there's my lame introduction to Bond, but I did discover a certain man with lockjaw who played the character very well, and I discovered the old Sean Connery ones, who was, of course, the original Bond, and arguably the best Bond, still by a lot of people's standards, although the box office would maybe beg to differ just because Daniel Craig's make a lot of money, which, if you go by that, you could say Daniel Craig's the best Bond, but obviously, as we all know,
that's not the case.
Money is not always the case. If that were the case, Shakespeare in Love wouldn't have won Best Picture. I don't even know how that won Best Picture anyway, because of Saving Private Ryan.
The Weinsteins have a lot of friends, man.
Maybe a better example would be Crash. How the heck did Crash win? And that made nothing. And Hurt Locker, that made like $12 million in theaters or something silly like that. But anyway, we're digressing.
Stay on target.
And so what we're going to do here is just go back and forth with some of our favorite James Bonds before we get into Spectre. So, Dakota, why don't you go ahead and start? What is one Bond that you always go, you know what? That is definitely in my top two.
Wow, top two. Oh, man, I don't know if I can. Dr. No.
Dr. No. Which
the first of
go.
the bunch.
The first came out in what, 1962?
Yes.
And yeah, just it was the first one. Bond came out of the gate pretty strong. I mean, it's still a pretty entertaining movie by today's standards. Obviously, a lot of the gadgets, things like that, are a little 60s. Maybe the filming, blah blah blah. Special effects, are obviously, when he's sitting in the car driving, it's like a movie theater screen behind him and he's fake driving. But it's still an engaging movie, and it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, there's this is probably, I think you could tell it's one of the more well thought of movies, because this movie pretty much inspired a lot of lampooning. Apparently, it was this movie that
just the beach scene alone has been lampooned how many times?
Yeah, this is. If you watch this, you definitely see where Mike Myers stole most of his material from.
Yeah, Dakota's referring to Austin Powers, I'm guessing.
Yes.
I mean, those are basically, they are James Bond ripoffs. But yes, Mike Myers kind of did the thing where if I'm going to rip off, I'm going to rip off from the best. And so he went back. And yes, there's a lot of ripping off of Dr. No, the early James Bonds and those. But yeah.
Yeah, this... for a movie this old, this is something I don't think they really did back then, but they actually have a really strong villain.
Yeah, well, and that's what makes it, usually if you look at the better Bonds compared to the not so good Bonds, it usually comes down to the villain is what makes them good or bad, because obviously, like the old saying of a hero's only as good as its villain, and I think Bond is definitely one that fits in that category. Because if you have a lame villain, all the movie is some guy globetrotting with a smirk on his face, drinking martinis, and so you need to have an interesting, even to the point of sinister villain for it to really work. And yeah, they came out of the gates with I'm trying to remember who played the villain in Dr. No.
Oh man,
Didn't know if you had his name down.
No, this is slightly embarrassing. I thought I could remember it. Ricardo Montalban.
Bernard Lee? No, Joseph Wiseman, sorry.
Joseph Wiseman, yes.
Yeah, Joseph Wiseman.
Good Lord.
Bernard Lee, he was M. I just threw out the British name, but yeah, that's right. Joseph Wiseman, he's who played Dr. No. And his presence fit well too, because he kind of had that, he sat and had that squinty-eyed face. He kind of had that look of like, I'm a villain or something. You know what else Dr. No reminds me a lot of is The Incredibles.
Yes.
Like when Mr. Incredible, when he goes to that island, just the way Brad Bird decided to film and do the whole sequence, and the way he decided to have the music there, that is so James Bond-esque, I guess is how you'd say it. and they almost had Syndrome be like a Dr. No in a way, and kind of had his femme fatale helper with him there and stuff. And yeah, it just feels very James Bondy when you watch that sequence, especially of The Incredibles.
Yeah. Every time I watch this movie or think of it, I always wish that Christopher Lee was playing Dr. No, seeing as how he was the inspiration for the character look-wise. He was, for those of you who don't know, he was no, not Albert Broccoli.
Ian Fleming.
He was Ian Fleming's cousin, who wrote the James Bond books. And he kind of took the physical characteristics of his cousin and used them for his character. Yeah.
Yep. But what is, like, the basic plot of Dr. No? I know it involves the space program, but why don't you give us kind of a rundown of what's going on? This is obviously early 60s, so you had to involve the space program.
Yeah. Oddly enough, this movie kind of had the format for what would become all the Bond movies would start using. There's a military intelligence person who's killed in Jamaica, and M decides to send James Bond to Jamaica to find out what is going on. He gets down there. He meets up with a member of the CIA. They find out that this villain is, I don't even remember what it was. Was it something to disrupt the...
Sorry, you're trying to think of what he... Yeah, he had a thing for...
The weapon. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Yeah, it was supposed to disrupt the American space program stuff. I can't remember what the exact weapon was called so much, but...
I think it was like something that emitted rays or something?
Yeah.
Not a death ray, though. Not a death
ray. Not yet!
But yeah, this villain he's situated on an island, and they travel to the island to more or less eliminate him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much from this movie that has now become iconic of the character of James Bond.
Or cliche, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, this is the first movie where you had the James Bond theme and then the intro of looking down the barrel of a gun and seeing him walk in front of it and shoot.
Mm-hmm.
This is also where, right off the bat, you had Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. No was an agent of Spectre.
Why does that name seem familiar? Oh, they brought it back into the franchise.
Yeah, after being gone for several decades, it's back.
Yeah, for quite a while. It hasn't been really involved in the Bond movies that we know of. But yeah, yep. Spectre was... Well, and then they kind of make fun of it in Get Smart. Like, they have their version of Spectre, but it's called Chaos, and it's like K-A-O-S. And I mean, that's another case where James Bond is really spoofed, but with an American agent who was an idiot, you know?
Yeah.
And, I mean, it was the Cold War. I mean, you got to remember, Ian Fleming kind of was inspired to do these type of spy things because of his experience with World War II. But then you had the Cold War immediately follow, where he could use that as his inspiration and plot devices in these movies. And so you had these versions of it where they were like more or less taking Cold War type stuff. We'll put seriously into quotes just because it's still James Bond. And that was the thing. You either kind of had your kind of popcorn action movies like the James Bonds, you had the serious Cold War movies, and then of course you had your spoof Cold War stuff, which would be Get Smart. What's the other thing I was just remembering?
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, there was kind of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. and stuff, and it seemed like the spoof stuff was always more in TV show form, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, Hogan's Heroes was kind of a lampooning the Nazis, you know, and that was a TV show also, and that was World War II, but yeah, it's just always looked over. But you have anything more on Dr. No?
Other than it's great film, and oddly enough has held up pretty well over the test of time.
Yeah. I mean, you'll know it's 60s when you watch it, but like I was saying, doesn't mean it's bad to watch. I watch a lot of old movies that are still fine, still good, still a good little watch on the screen. So, yeah, well, I'll go ahead and take one here. The first one that I've chosen was actually the second one to be made. It was the Sean Connery, just the follow-up where they had Sean Connery still playing James Bond. Of course, he played James Bond for a number of films, but it was From Russia with Love. And this one is he gets involved into an assassination plot, and they're involving a Russian woman, and they're trying to recover a Soviet encryption device that, of course, this one involves Spectre again. Spectre! I said Spectre! I knew I'd do that. He's trying to recover this encryption device that was stolen by Spectre. And so you have just the continuation of Spectre as the villains in this one. But what I like about this one, too, is that Robert Shaw plays the villain. And I think if you're going to have a villain in a movie, why not get Robert Shaw? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot he was even actually in any Bond movies.
Yeah. He played the villain in this one. And his name was God, why am I so bad with remembering their names tonight? Oh, he's called Grant, I guess.
Surprised it wasn't some German sounding name.
Interestingly, though, the reason this one was made next was because they listed, JFK wrote down his list of his favorite books for Time magazine, and one of his favorite books he listed was From Russia with Love.
Really?
And so when the studio saw that, they immediately put this one into production to be the next Bond movie.
Wow.
Because of JFK saying, but you got to remember that JFK was another president, kind of like how Obama gets treated, where they're almost as much a celebrity as they are president. And so people really looked to what JFK, and part of it was that he was young, and he had like this young wife, and they had these little kids and things like that. And so yeah, they made this their next movie because of that. And then the other thing that's crazy about this movie is Sean Connery almost died making this movie because the helicopter pilot, crashed.
Yeah.
And it almost killed Connery. And the other thing that's interesting is that Alfred Hitchcock was thinking of directing this one and having Cary Grant play James Bond and Grace Kelly being the main woman. And it just, all these things could have made, all these things are what, first off, you had From Russia with Love because of JFK, and then all these other different ways they could have, it's just crazy to think about that. But it's Cary Grant, he's basically played versions of James Bond in other movies where I could see that pretty easily if that would have happened that way.
I don't think anybody would have bought it, though, because that's before they started doing this, they don't want to come back, we'll just recast them thing. Yeah.
No. So, yeah, but this one, I don't know, I just liked I just have memories of this. Well, the first three Bonds are usually considered the best by a lot of people, but I just think this one is just really good, just because you have Dr. No, which is a great beginning, but then this one just really, it just takes you to the next step further into the adventures of Bond and, and all the different things he runs into, and just go a little, like, the next step further with Spectre and all those types of things. And so yeah, that was one that came to mind pretty quick when I was thinking through which ones I wanted to bring up. So I don't know. Where do you put From Russia with Love, I guess, on your...
Oh, it's definitely probably in the top 5.
Well, it's in my top 3, so boom.
Yeah. Well, there's so much James Bond to go around.
You can't just say it like that. No.
Well, I meant the movies and the actors. Each one kind of has their pluses. If you like dark and violent, I guess Timothy Dalton's your guy. If you like jokey and cheesy, Roger Moore's your man.
Yep. And if you like Jason Bourne, Daniel Craig's your man.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. Table that.
But I'm just going to go ahead and volley it back over to you. Dakota, what do you got next for another one that came to mind for you?
Okay, this one is kind of an underdog, and some of you are going to be surprised it's not on the underwhelming or the overlooked James Bond category, but On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby.
The one that he just slightly brought up earlier in this episode, how he was a one-off Bond for different reasons. But, why don't you go ahead? What's the kind of rundown of that one?
You mean, well, there's...
Plot.
Oh, I thought you were going to wanted me to talk about how he was actually hired.
Oh, no.
Has come to light recently. But anyway, well, the plot of this one is actually kind of interesting because I don't remember where it takes place. All I remember is it's on a beach, and our Mr. Bond here happens across a young woman who is attempting to kill herself.
And she's a mob boss's daughter, right? The daughter of a mobster?
I want to say yes. She was an Italian crime lord, I believe. This is how evil they are. Their last name is Draco. Yeah, that's right.
The same as Malfoy's first name.
But Mr. Bond eventually finds out that this Draco has ties to Blofeld, so he decides to kind of get close to her father by getting close to her. And in this movie, Blofeld, who was actually played before by Donald Pleasence, is played by Telly Savalas, who I thought did a pretty good job of that. And
he's the bald guy's Kojak, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, he was in Dirty Dozen.
There you go.
And The Battle of the Bulge, which was the first movie I saw him in. But
I think the first thing I remember seeing him in, this is a little off topic, was that Twilight Zone episode where he's the abusive father, and that doll keeps saying that she's going to kill him. Like, I'm Susie Hugs a lot, and I'm going to kill you, or whatever, and he keeps throwing it away, and it keeps coming back. Anyway, moving on.
But anyway, eventually what happens in the movie, this Draco character asks Bond to protect his daughter.
Yes.
And sorry, I completely blanked out there.
You're
Good
just
Lord.
staring.
No, I was thinking, okay, because this plot gets kind of convoluted just a little bit, but
He's sweating bullets over there trying to bring it across to you smoothly, and he.
Okay, he has James Bond to protect his daughter. He eventually ends up marrying her, and he ends up giving Bond information to lead him to Blofeld, who is hiding out in the Alps.
Yeah, the Swiss Alps, which most of you, that's where you've probably seen this movie, is that the skiing sequence is like famously always shown whenever they talk about James Bond. That's usually when people think, whenever you go On Her Majesty's Secret Service, usually the first image that comes to mind for most people is downhill skiing in the Alps. But yeah, that's where that comes into play is that.
But yeah, back to Blofeld. He kind of has a plan to destroy mankind with. He comes up with a virus, and 12 angels of death he infects with this virus, and like I said, it's very convoluted, and they plan on spreading this disease through food. Like he plans on sending them out, and they're supposed to infect the world with this disease, and everyone's supposed to die. Like I said, very hard to
and then it kind of turns into this, he has to choose between his loyalty to his country and what he's meant to do, and the love he has for Draco's woman. I mean,
Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy. Thank you.
His daughter.
Tra-
Not his woman.
What?
Oh.
Wow, that did not come across right. Anyway, yeah, Dakota's right. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in this one, but
There's no easy way to sum up this plot. I'm sorry, guys.
which is why, yeah, it is kind of tricky. But it's another one where it is interesting to watch, even if just for the sake of the fact that it's like this James. It's almost like a one-off James Bond in one way, even though it was still like canon Bond where Broccoli's still produced it and things like that. Where it's just interesting to watch for that reason of just seeing this kind of, because it's a very different Bond in this. He's different in a lot of ways. James Bond finds a woman he wants to marry in this movie, which
Yeah, he actually falls.
you don't really see that much ever with Bond, him falling in love, except for maybe like Daniel Craig a little bit with Eva Green and things like that. But even that was really short lived. And
yeah, their romance takes up a good chunk of this movie.
Because usually how James Bonds are is it ends with him totally enamored by one woman, but then by the next movie she's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, she doesn't even get mentioned or name dropped. It's just like,
It's just like, yep, she's gone. And,
time to start living life.
And so there's just a lot of interesting different elements with that one, but yeah. But yeah, well, my second choice, and I'll explain my reasons for picking this one after I say it, but I picked Casino Royale, I'll just say it's the 2006 one, the first Daniel Craig one, just because there is a Bond spoof of sorts called Casino Royale from the 60s with David Niven.
Which I'm oddly surprised that movie got made.
Yes, it's pretty racy for a lot of reasons, a lot of innuendos in that movie.
And it stars one of all people.
Well, David Niven, Peter Sellers, Woody Allen.
Woody Allen. Oh, holy cow. I want to say Woody Harrelson.
At least one Bond girl shows up in it. Ursula Andress, I know, is in it.
That's right.
Who is the Dr. No Bond girl. But this is the 2006 one, the one that introduced us to the most recent James Bond, Daniel Craig. Whether he's done or not at this point of filming, he's the most recent James Bond of us filming or recording this episode. And the reason I picked this one is because I had literally just totally like thrown like James Bond out who even cares? Don't even care. They released like a photo of this, I remember.
So you're one of the people that lost faith.
Yeah. And then they released a photo of that they were filming this movie in like sometime in early 2006. And it was like him standing there. It's like, whatever. There's a lot of people that are freaking out because they picked this blonde guy to play James Bond, even though they darkened his hair up a little bit. Well, I didn't care about that. I just didn't care at all because it's like, oh, it'll just be another James Bond, which has been pretty crappy for the most part. I mean, the Pierce Brosnan ones were really hit and miss. Mostly miss. But so I didn't care. Didn't see it in theaters. Didn't see it till it was out on DVD, which is all we had at that time. Because, yeah, I think they finally quit making VHSs by that time where it was like DVD was what you got.
Yeah, what year did this come out?
It came out in 06,
yeah.
So it would have been out on video in 07. So I didn't see it till 07, technically. Because it came out in like November of 06.
Yeah, back when they took a year to make it to the home viewing experience.
Yeah. So I ended up watching it, and I was blown away by how interesting it was. They took Bond in kind of this new direction where it was it was more serious, but not in like a DC universe type way where it feels like they're being overly gritty and dark for no reason. It just felt like they figured out a way to like make him a little more dark and interesting without just being like, oh, he's just going to be dark. And so I just thought that was cool. And then a couple other things I thought was cool was that when Daniel Craig was apparently Barbara Broccoli, who took over from her dad being the new kind of head of the Bond films. He was her first choice after she saw him in like this kind of little scene British crime movie called Layer Cake. Which
is a great movie, mind you.
Yeah. Anyway, she goes, "That's who I want for Bond," and a lot of people were kind of against her, but they got him, and he took it very seriously. When he got the role of Bond, he gained 20 pounds in muscle. He quit smoking, and I mean he read up and just he wanted. I mean, he was taking it seriously. And of course, I found this all out later because, of course, when this was all happening, I didn't really give a crap.
I was going to say, yeah, he definitely packed on the pounds because there was a movie that had come out.
Yeah, he was kind of a skinny, small man.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like he was a runt. He was just not bulky. You
know? He pulled a Christian Bale and just packed on the pounds in a short amount of time. Not like, in a bad way, but muscle.
Yeah, 20 pounds of just muscle he gained when he was Bond in Casino Royale. And I think the only thing I had really seen Daniel Craig in before this was Munich, which was a Steven Spielberg movie from like
05?
05, yeah, it would have been just like a year or so before this. And then he was in Kid King Arthur's Court from like 1994 or whatever that Disney made, where he actually played the knight that... Or no, he wasn't. He was like a squire who was in love with the princess, played by Kate Winslet. They were the love story in that movie.
Wow.
Yeah, go find Kid King Arthur's Court. It's funny because Kate Winslet and Daniel Craig are like a side plot in it. And now they're like, movie stars or whatever. But yeah, but anyway, and then of course this movie, it starts really interesting where you see Bond,
he officially becomes a 00.
Officially becomes a 00 in this really interesting black and white sequence they start the movie with, and then there it goes into kind of this parkour sequence in the movie that's actually really cool too. And apparently they took like 6 weeks to film that.
Yeah, it's intense.
And I guess what I'm getting at by saying all these things is that when they rebooted it, so to speak, in this way, it just it modernized Bond in a way he needed to be modernized, because it felt like through the Pierce Brosnan years, even though Pierce Brosnan was playing Bond in modern times, he still felt so old-fashioned in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they were trying to go with that whole he's still a gentleman spy, and his movies didn't really deal with anything that was going on in the world at that time. They referenced the fact that the Cold War was over, and that the Russian military was kind of just falling apart, and a lot of Russian people or officials were corrupt, but that was it.
Yeah, right.
And I think they kind of took cues from Batman Begins and the Jason Bourne movie, where they decided they were going to reboot it. And I mean, at the one line that stood out to me in this movie was somebody asked James Bond how he wanted his martini, and I think he said something like, "Do I look like I give a damn?"
That's actually from the book, though.
Oh,
I at some point I had heard that that they lifted that right out of the pages. That apparently Ian Fleming kind of had James Bond like that before it kind of got into the cliche "shaken not stirred" thing. But yeah, it is. But you could still argue that they found the right place to put that back into the franchise and say, here he... And you're right. Another thing I heard at one point was that Batman Begins was a huge influence on where... Batman Begins, when they saw that movie, the Broccoli's and the people in charge, they went, that's what we want to do. If we're going to do Bond again, that's what we want to do with it. And you're right, that was an influence. And it worked for Batman. It worked for James Bond, but I'm so sick of everything thinking it needs to be dark and gritty to a point of too far. But yeah, those were a couple franchises where this ended up working out. But the gist of Casino Royale is his first mission as a 00 agent, 007, is he has to
win a poker tournament.
He has to win a Texas Hold'em tournament against a weapons dealer. Now, mind you, this is, when you think about this too hard, it's kind of silly. They're going to risk all this money in the fact that they hope James Bond is going to win, what basically comes down to luck. But you kind of forgive it just because overall this movie just has good pacing, and and things like that, and just it plays well. And Mads Mikkelsen plays an interesting villain in this movie with his weird little eye thing he has to dab and things like that. But yeah, they really make it's weird because James Bond, this new James Bond, is basically was almost like a rogue agent from the start. I mean, it's like he basically from the get go of being a 00 agent, he's almost like a rogue agent.
Yeah.
Through Skyfall and possibly Spectre, I don't know.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, he just kind of here's a couple of my cons. Well, first off, I don't really like how the fact that they had to change it to Texas Hold'em. Why couldn't it have just been Baccarat?
Because Texas Hold'em was more popular at the time.
Yeah, it's just stupid. It just feels like feels like they Americanized the movie.
Which, as of right now, I don't even know if it's still like the big poker thing. Is it? I think it's fallen out of style.
I don't know. That's why they should have just left it as Baccarat.
I don't even think Baccarat's back in style though.
But it would have just looked cooler. Anyway, that's just a little nitpicky thing.
Wait a minute, wasn't... Sorry, kind of digressing here, but isn't that what they're playing in GoldenEye? Him and Xenia on the top.
Yes. I think they... Ow. I just hit the mic. Yes, I think they are playing...
See, it would have worked, I guess.
They played it in that one.
It's not distracting in that movie. It wouldn't have been distracting in this one.
It wasn't distracting in that movie, but yeah, that was just like... There was a few things. Another sin is that Jeffrey Wright...
Apparently we're cinnamon sins now, people.
Jeffrey Wright is totally underused. They bring in Jeffrey Wright to play...
Felix Leiter, of all people.
To play this American CIA agent.
Who, his character previously showed up in James Bond films. Yes.
And I think he shows up in Quantum of Solace, too. And in both of them, he's totally underused. I mean, why did you get such a great actor to play him? Because Jeffrey Wright's pretty good.
Well, it was, like I said, this was James Bond Begins. I think they were looking down the road like, oh, we need a good actor for this character. Can't just have no schmo off the streets be Felix Leiter.
Yeah.
Felix Leiter, however you pronounce that name.
Anyway, but overall, I mean, this is a really interesting movie. And the other interesting thing they've done with this new franchise is that there's a storyline that carries over to the next movie.
Yeah.
Whereas that never, like we just talked about, that never used to happen. It was like, also the next movie is like, who? I guess I don't remember who those people are. And he's just kind of like moved on.
Except he says it in a less flamboyant way.
Dang it, I got called flamboyant. That's embarrassing. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool. Although a lot of people would say Quantum of Solace was a waste of a movie, in the fact, because they did carry over the storyline. But I didn't think Quantum of Solace is quite as junky as everybody makes it out to be. Well, it could have been better, but that's what you could say about all of Mark Forrester's movis.
Well,
the same thing could be said about World War Z. Could have been better.
People were going to it expecting a meal. They got a light snack, and
more of a brunch. It is a little more than a light snack, although it technically is the shortest James Bond in the entire franchise. But yeah. So yeah, those are our picks. Dakota had Dr. No and
On Her Majesty's Secret
Service. And I had From Russia with Love and Casino Royale. It's kind of our highlight ones that we've kind of enjoyed for different reasons. It's interesting, like we said, just to watch these 60s kind of Cold War type ones and what they considered cool gadgets and stuff like that. But at the same time, they're still kind of fun movies to watch. And then On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just interesting because of it's different in so many ways and yet still has a certain amount of continuity with who James Bond is. And then Casino Royale, just an interesting new reboot into the James Bond we all know and love now.
One thing that I always liked about Casino Royale.
What's that? Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought that was rhetorical or whatever.
Okay. In GoldenEye, I'm going to bring this up right now. In GoldenEye, Pierce Brosnan's first Bond movie.
People are going to think we're drunk on this episode.
We are completely sober. High on life, maybe. Completely sober. No, but in GoldenEye, James Bond actually kills 47 people.
I believe
That's just him.
Yeah, I believe that.
And he kind of doesn't even really give a second thought about it.
No, well, that's how James Bond was for a lot of years. He was kind of like, meh, kind of give a little smirk and a wink as he kills people.
Like, yeah, I just killed 12 people. What's for lunch?
He was basically the Punisher, but in more of a wink and a smile sort of way.
But, I mean, it's fine. That's fine.
Is it fine?
You don't really think about that sort of thing as you're watching a movie. It's not till later that hits you like, wow, he just killed a lot of people. This is actually one stone cold killer.
He is.
Maybe the reason we don't hear about these Bond girls in the next movie is he's killed them.
I think this is the danger. Maybe what the whole point of these movies is showing us the danger of giving someone a license to kill.
Yeah.
They just go out and just kill whoever they want to.
But
no consequences.
But there is a scene in Casino Royale where he briefly touches on the fact that at one point in time he wasn't just a stone-hearted, bullet to the face type of guy. And Eva Green's character, I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, but she asked James Bond what it was like for his first time. Mm-hmm. And he says something along the lines of, I went through the same thing. Because her character ends up killing somebody, and she doesn't deal with it too well.
No, not at all. No,
well, like Clint Eastwood said, it's a hell of a thing to kill a man. You take away everything he's got and everything he will have.
Is that from
Unforgiven? Sorry, yeah. I wanted to say that for the longest time, and I just did. Yeah,
that's a classic kind of anti-violence movie, really. In a lot of ways, Unforgiven. Eva Green's name was Vesper.
Vesper Lind, yes. Sounds like a scooter.
That'd be Vespa. Yamaha Lind. Yeah. So I think now, why don't you just bring up what are some maybe overlooked, underrated James Bonds that came to mind for you, Dakota? What do you got for that?
Well,
really?
I think I am going to go with The Living Daylights.
Okay. The first of two, Timothy Dalton. Those were the 80s ones.
Yeah, people kind of look down on Timothy Dalton just because there was a lot of things about his James Bond that some people don't like, and it was really that I think that they were trying to distance themselves from Roger Moore. Mm-hmm. Roger Moore's James Bond eventually got to be a little too over the top.
Yes.
I mean,
way over the top.
Moonraker, cool name, good idea, love Jaws,
and actually, that one was one that followed the book closest. Moonraker was the last movie to follow one of the novels until Casino Royale with Daniel Craig.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Sorry, I said that kind of backwards, but yeah, right. Well, and Timothy Dalton had a lot to say. Apparently, I had heard him talk about this in an interview about how if he was going to play James Bond, he wanted it to be the way it is. I want to play him really hardcore, serious, and of course these movies were like mid to late 80s.
Yeah,
and that was when you had a lot of,
and he's taking
a lot of growth in the feminist movement also, and so there wasn't so much exploitation of women in these movies either.
Yeah, the Bond girls in this movie definitely don't need saving. No,
they don't need saving. They are fully dressed, which is pretty rare for a Bond. And there's a lot of things that are different. But you're right, The Living Daylights isn't a bad movie, and Robert Davi plays an interesting villain. Yeah,
this was the reason I bring it up is it was always one of my stepdad's favorites. When TNT would do the marathons,
yes,
he would watch the first couple and then take a huge break until this one showed up.
Yeah, USA back in the day, that rhymed. USA back in the day, the USA Network, they would show the Timothy Dalton, or was it TBS? One of those two would
TNT.
Maybe it was TNT too, but they play the Timothy Dalton ones especially a lot.
Actually, I think it was TBS. I know TNT.
Was it TBS?
TNT just played the James Bond movies a lot in general.
Yeah, it was either TBS or USA 102. I remember would play the Timothy Dalton ones a lot, and maybe some of that was. I'm remembering this from the mid '90s, and those would have been a couple of the newer ones, obviously. Since Pierce Brosnan, the next Bond after Dalton would have been until 1985.
Yeah.
So that's probably was some of that now that I think about it. It's kind of like how when we were growing up, Back to the Future was on TV all the time. But it was like the cable networks had just gotten the rights to it because they were mid to late 80s movies. But Back to the Future is on TV all the time.
Well, it's the future now, so...
Yeah. The future is now the past. Mind blowing. It's like that meme with that guy who's at the party with like his stupid like bulgy eye face. Like, the future's now the past. But yeah, Living Daylight. Any other ones?
You know, one that...
Oh, yeah?
Oh, I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say one that a lot of people I know that don't really look too favorably upon was one that you brought up, The Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm.
That was, it was probably a lot more clever than Roger Moore's other James Bond entries. Some of them were just kind of just too jokey. And
yeah, I was going to say, I think what makes The Spy Who Loved Me seem better is that it wasn't so campy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came across just better in a lot of ways. But yeah, that would be another one of his better ones. Because even like, what was that, For Your Eyes Only?
For Your Eyes Only?
Yeah, that was kind of campy. I mean, obviously, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, those are probably the campiest in a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean,
keep in mind too, at this point they had actually gotten better effects, but they were still cheesy.
Yeah. But for me, I guess one that came to mind, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The World Is Not Enough. I think that's a little underrated. It's
great theme song. I'm just putting that out there.
It's written by like some
Garbage
wrote it, which I think is hilarious. The world is not enough.
I don't know why, but I actually really like that song. And back in the day when you did this, you burned CDs.
After he downloaded it on Kazaa. Or Napster?
LimeWire.
LimeWire.
That's right. I used LimeWire.
Oh, you weren't a Kazaa guy. You were LimeWire. Huh?
Nope. I was a pirate. I'm sorry, people.
Savvy. Yeah. That was kind of a hit song. Probably Garbage's only hit song. I don't know.
They had a few.
But yeah.
The video for it in itself would have made a good James Bond movie.
A weird video. I remember that video. But The World Is Not Enough. Yes, the villain is kind of silly with how he's got this bullet stuck in his brain that makes him not feel pain.
You know that.
Now, what's silly about that is, okay, he doesn't feel pain. But because of the fact that he can't feel pain, he's invincible, almost. That's kind of silly. But other than that, the only other weak thing is Denise Richards. But otherwise, Sophie Marceau is a great kind of femme fatale. Pierce Brosnan seems probably the most comfortable playing Bond in this one. You know, more so than... Because Tomorrow Never Dies, I don't know. I don't think him and Terry Hatcher got along. He just seemed really uncomfortable.
Well, she's just very difficult to work with.
But, yeah, I don't know. It's just... Again, it's not great. But it was also made in 1999, so that could be some of it. That was when movies started to get kind of weird. Kind of 99. I mean, you had... There's a reason, like, The Matrix was, like... You know, that came out this same year. The reason that was such, like, a whoa was because movies were kind of cruddy for a while after that. And so,
yeah, the big box office, the ones that were supposed to be the big ones were kind of just, wow, that underwhelmed pretty bad.
Yeah, so...
You know, one
again,
thing...
it's just... And the other thing I thought was always interesting about World's Not Enough is directed by Michael Apted, where when you look at the rest of his resume, I mean, this
Why
guy,
does that name sound
well,
familiar?
he did like Gorillas in the Mist. And,
Oh,
I mean, this is kind of a strange work on his resume, but yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, but it's not terrible. And
you could say it's good. Come on.
I guess I don't mind it. I'll put it that way. And another one, excuse me, that came to mind was You Only Live Twice. That was another one that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like this one gets brought up a lot. I don't know.
No,
when people
it definitely doesn't.
And I guess I didn't think this one was that bad. I don't see anything wrong with Secret Service Ninja Forces. But it's basically Bond trying to stop nuclear war in that movie. But I don't know. I always just thought it was cool how it starts with him faking his own death and all that stuff. And it's kind of clever in those ways. But anyway, it's kind of overlooked one. Another one's okay. Sean Connery. Come on. He is Bond.
Yeah.
James Bond. So,
did you ever hear the fan theory about the whole James Bond name?
no.
Oh. Well, this is probably the only time we get to bring it up, so I'll bring it up.
Do it.
This
Then we better end the show.
This actually comes from an Alan Moore comic book, one of his League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic books.
Oh boy.
It
This should be interesting.
it implies that at one point in time there was this secret agent named James Bond who is just so amazing at what he did and just struck fear into the heart of the British Empire's enemies that they decided to keep going with it. That they when he got too old to keep going, they found a replacement for him. He took up the name James Bond.
Okay.
And then he got too old, and in the same comic book, they reference B1, B2. Actually, they don't call the first one B1. They refer to him as just the James Bond. But physically, the B2 and the B5 actually look a lot like Roger Moore and Daniel Craig.
Okay.
Even down to Moore's little mole on his face and Craig's icy blue eyes and blonde hair.
It's the steel blue eyes. Huh. Well, that's interesting.
But some people kind of picked it up and ran with it, like, there's hints in Casino Royale that's what happened to Daniel Craig's character, like he's not the actual James Bond. Then Skyfall came and kind of blew that out of the water.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, most of those types of fan theories are just stay theories.
I thought that was an interesting one, though.
Yeah. Another interesting theory in movie world is really off. It has nothing to do with James Bond. Is if you're interested in crazy movie theories, you guys should check out the Pixar theory of how all the movies are interconnected. That's an interesting theory too. But
well, that's on top of that whole all Disney movies are somehow in the same universe.
yeah. But the Pixar one, it's trickier because you're like, what? How can a anthropomorphic car world be on the same timeline as Brave? And so it's interesting. Anyway, Spectre. We haven't brought it up yet.
the coup de grace to our evening. Yes. Or as Steven refers to it, Spectra.
So that's just the American in me. I didn't see Spectre, but Dakota did. And so Dakota's going to give us a rundown here of some of his feelings toward this latest installment in the Bond franchise. So, Dakota, what do we got here for the plot and your rundown?
Oh, man, the plot's going to be tough. All right, here, let's see if I can mess this one up, too.
Does the plot thicken? That's all I want to know.
It gets crazy. There's a lot of twists and turns in this one. I am probably nowhere near going to be able to do this justice. But, all right, let's go. Okay, the movie starts off in Mexico City on the Day of the Dead. For those of you that saw the poster with the poster with the guy dressed as a skeleton, that's what that's from. And at the start of the movie, we have James Bond, and he is actually on a mission from M, but not the current M, the previous one, who was played by Judi Dench, who died.
So this is a flashback.
No. This is happening now.
Oh.
Posthumously, she sent him a letter telling him to go do this thing.
Ah, okay.
And he is in Mexico City. And, well, at the begin. I'm sorry. Okay, the beginning of this movie is actually pretty action packed. It was one of those kind of like Skyfall, where it was just really cool. It just kind of roped you in.
Was this the classic pre-opening credits action sequence?
It was.
Bond loves doing that.
But yeah, like I said, very action packed. And, well, that's really about my one favorite part in this movie.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Well, okay, before we go in further, we should probably talk a little bit about Skyfall. Skyfall was one of those movies where it was supposed to kind of get James Bond back on track. You know, we had James Bond Begins. Then we had James Bond Continues.
Right.
And Skyfall was supposed to be James Bond gets back to being James Bond the way he was meant to be.
Yeah, like James Bond's roots.
Yeah.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people were kind of hoping it would go back to the way it was, where you would have the opening mission where James Bond would just kind of cause a lot of destruction, save the world, kill the bad guys. And then, you know, cool opening sequence, Bond music. We hear the song for the movie, and then Bond's back in London, gets the mission from M, goes out, kills a bunch of other bad guys.
Yada, yada, yada. Yada, yada.
Saves the world, gets the beautiful girl, all that.
Never talks to beautiful girl again.
That is what a lot of people were hoping that this movie would be, and that it would bring back the beloved villain group Spectre. Unfortunately, it only did one of those things.
Which one was that? Bring back Spectre?
Yes. Because when Bond gets back to England, he is actually in a ton of hot water because he was off on an unsanctioned mission, and the new M is just furious.
He's still rogue?
Yes, he went Jack Bauer.
But this time, this is what's interesting, is he was always, before that, going rogue because he wasn't listening to M. Now listening to the former M caused him to still be rogue.
Yeah, but they go into a backstory. They go into a story about how MI5, which is a completely different other military intelligence organization from MI6, which is what 007 works for, is actually being merged with MI6.
MI5's a real one, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, MI6 was at one point in time.
That's true.
But the idea is that the head of the MI5 wants to completely do away with the 007 program, thinking they're all...
The 00 program.
Yeah, the 00 program, yes, because there's not just one 007. But he believes they're old, they're outdated, they don't work in this world. You know, pretty much was what was said in Skyfall about James Bond.
It's true. Yeah, it was kind of brought up about, that he was kind of a relic. Don't they even say you're a relic of the Cold War? Or
yeah. They do, unfortunately.
Okay. So.
But, here's where it gets tough. From the...
Starting to gather his thoughts here.
I don't know what you want to call it. From the villain, if you want to call him that, who is killed in the opening action sequence, James Bond actually took a ring. You might have seen it in the trailer. It's the silver ring with the stylized octopus on it. Well, anyway, he eventually starts asking around, trying to find out what the ring signifies.
You have the wing?
He comes into contact with the man's wife that he killed.
Not the first time he's done that. No, I was kidding.
But anyway, he comes into the man's wife. She kind of lets it slip that he was a part of Spectre. Lets him know that it's... tells him about how it's a worldwide organization that's evil. And eventually, Bond is somehow able to track down, through various means, he finds Mr. White, who showed up in the first two of Daniel Craig's Bond movies. He was involved with the organization Quantum, and we find out that Mr. White's daughter apparently is in danger from the leader of Spectre, who is not a fan of Mr. White. And Mr. White asked...
It's because he's black, isn't it?
Mr. White asked James Bond to protect his daughter. He agrees. Eventually, he finds out through some information where Spectre is meeting. He goes there. Oberhauser, that is the main villain of the movie, who I'm not gonna completely spoil it for you. Although Steven's probably thinking differently, but he turns out to be connected to James Bond in that
twin brother.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Apparently, he was the son of the man who took in James Bond.
Son of the man with the golden gun. No.
But
okay.
James Bond was orphaned, as we found out in Skyfall, as a small child. He was taken in by this Oberhauser's father and pretty much replaced him as his son, and it made him angry. And he did
kind of a Thor thing here, huh?
Yeah, in reverse, because he was
Thor in reverse. Yeah,
and he got angry, and he ended up killing his father.
A lot of spoilers in this review here.
Honestly, I'm just trying to sum this up without sounding too mixed up, and I'm just failing miserably. But anyway, you find out that pretty much every single villain in James Bond's movies has ties to this man. They were all supposed to have been agents of Spectre.
Oh, okay, and kind of groomed by this man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of just convoluted, like, really? Because it seems like they all kind of just met.
Yeah, that seems like that would... yeah, it'd be hard to really think too hard on that to make that work. Okay.
But yeah, anyway. Oh, by the way, Mr. White killed himself. But, whatever. He was dying of some illness. I don't even think I don't remember what it was. Leukemia? But yeah, he killed himself. So don't ask me what happened with Mr. White, because he's dead. So this Oberhauser tells his guards, seize the man. And because he's James Bond, he takes out the man. There's this awesome car chase through, I think it's Rome.
So what I'm getting from all this is that it has some cool action vignettes,
yes.
but that
very convoluted storyline.
But it's convoluted and it's kind of nonsensical, and it doesn't quite make sense because of the fact they tried to tie together other parts of the Bond universe, so to speak.
Yeah.
Huh.
But anyway, back to another part of the story. You find out the head of the MI5 is apparently trying to join together with 9 other countries to create some sort of super intelligence ring. Keep in mind,
they'll call themselves Sir. Super intelligence ring. See, Sir.
There you go. There you go. But obviously, at this point, you kind of realize that something's going on with the guy from MI5. He doesn't seem too clear in his motives. Eventually, what it comes down to is you find out that he's working with Spectre, and that he's just really trying to cripple all these intelligence agencies I know, I'm just spoiling the entire movie for you people, and I should just stop, but I keep going.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to give away too much. Eventually, there's...
You say that. Oh, that's funny.
But eventually, there's the whole Bond gets kidnapped, Bond gets tied up, Bond escapes, explosions, death, helicopter flying into a bridge.
Here's my problem with okay, they took 3 out of the 4 James Bonds that Daniel Craig might do to set him up to be James Bond. Because finally by Skyfall, by the end of Skyfall, it's Moneypenny is Moneypenny and M is a man again. I don't know if that was part of it. And, back to the roots. And then they kind of came in and did this thing. And I don't know.
Like I said, it was somewhat of a disappointment.
Yeah. They just one of the reasons I like Casino Royale, it just is because of everything they did. Now it feels like they've just totally gone off track with it. And honestly, when I saw the trailer for Spectre, I honestly didn't have any interest.
Like I said,
in seeing it, but I'll be show my cards. I wasn't a huge fan of Skyfall, so I guess I should probably say that too.
See, it's more disappointing for me because I actually loved Skyfall.
Okay, and
I saw it, then I tried to drag like 5 of my friends to see it.
So did you thought the acting and cinematography, all that stuff was good with this movie? It was just like the storyline was just...
Yeah, it's just... I mean, you could tell that they were just kind of trying to tie everything together.
I was going to say, do you feel like maybe it was rushed? Like they're like, oh, we got to get the next Bond out?
Oh, definitely.
Because that was kind of what I felt was like, they really tried to get this one going, which you could. At the same time, it feels like James Bond movies do get stalled, but not so much. Not between Skyfall and Spectre. It was like they had this $1 billion movie, and they were like, we gotta follow it up.
Well,
Sam Mendes is still interested in doing it. And
well, first he said he wasn't. That he had only set out to do one, and then like at the drop of a hat, he turned around and was like, "Well, I have ideas for a bunch of other movies." Yeah, and it seems like they actually had fun with James Bond in Skyfall. Like they were trying to pay homage to the legacy of James Bond, if you want to say it.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas at the same time, trying to move him forward, getting him back to where we all want him to be. And in this one, they completely undid all of that. I mean, there's some scenes in here that actually harken back to other James Bond movies. There's a skiing down a slope thing with guys shooting after them. There's the Mexico City car chase is pretty reminiscent of The Living Daylights. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of nods to the old Bond movies. And I don't know, it's just the story is just so weak. It is. I mean,
so where
the big reveal of the scene was just so, I think, anticlimactic, and the part that really sucked was the ending, because I'm not going to give it and how that all went, because I feel like I've said too much at this point. Oh, I'm sorry. But it just ends, and you're like...
It just ends?
And I just sat there like, okay, why is the credits rolling? You can't leave it like this. You can't leave it like this. And then I stabbed my fist into the air and screamed, no.
Oh, man. So in what way would you recommend this? Would you recommend it to see at all?
Well, if you are actually a fan of James Bond movies, yes.
Are you sure? Because it sounds like you're a fan and you shook your fist at the end.
Well, just how it ended. I mean, there are good movies that just have bad endings. This is an okay movie with a bad ending.
It's an okay movie. Oh, there you go. That's a quote from Dakota. An okay movie with a bad ending.
All right, folks, just wait till it comes out on Redbox, and on a really cold Sunday nights, put it in.
Maybe Sunday afternoon. That way, Sunday night you can wash it down with a good Bond.
There you go. Watch this one, then put in Skyfall.
Then put in Moonraker, and you'll be good.
But it's just like I said, it was kind of a downer ending, not like Empire Strikes Back downer where the bad guys won.
More like disappointing, is that?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I guess we can just hope. Well, maybe this wouldn't be good either, but Christopher Nolan always talks about wanting to do a James Bond. I think that would be interesting to see what he would do with a James Bond.
He'd have to do it with Daniel Craig to wrap up this storyline.
Yeah.
It was just...
It's just, that's just a franchise he's always kind of...
Yeah.
But he is British, too, so maybe that's part of it. And he always drinks tea, so maybe that... He's like totally British, so maybe that's why he's a James Bond guy. But I think with that... We'll wrap up this very strange episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies, where we talked about some Bonds, we talked about the new Bond, and hopefully you learned some stuff. We gave you some nuggets of Bond things to nibble on and make you maybe want a little more. What this is...
Why are you talking?
This is getting weirder.
Let's just end the podcast. All right.
And you'll check out some of these Bonds. Got Dakota's review here of Spectre, where he leaves it to you to decide if you want to view it and how. But remember to if you haven't already, like us on Facebook, follow on there with movie news, updates on different things. So we hope you're doing that. Also, we're on YouTube, iTunes, any of those other podcast things. Subscribe, please, on something of those, whatever you use. Rate and review episodes, blah, blah, blah. Things like that. We hope you're doing that. So yeah, check us out in those places and do that. Check out older episodes like I've brought up in the past. A lot of the movies we've reviewed over this past year are now coming out on video, so you can get our take on them. So check those out. And yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap episodes. This is Steven.
And this is Dakota.
See you later.